It all started with a bark. Not just any bark, but one so persistent, so urgent, that it cut through the early morning silence like a siren from a forgotten past. On a seemingly ordinary day in rural Pennsylvania, where the only drama usually came from the weather or the occasional school board meeting, a family's golden retriever began to act in a way that no one could explain. Whining, pacing, pawing at the door, then darting off into the woods behind the house without hesitation. What happened next would unravel a decade-old mystery that had haunted an entire community. And yes, I know you've heard of incredible animal stories before. Dogs sniffing out danger, cats traveling cross-country to find their way home. But I promise you, this one is different. You clicked on this video because something in the title hit you, curiosity, maybe even hope. A missing person, a loyal dog, a mystery that refused to stay buried. Well, you're about to get that answer you're searching for. Stay with me. Before we dive into the heart of this jaw-dropping story, I want you to do something. Look around. Wherever you are right now. Your home, your car, your office. Imagine if someone you loved just vanished from that space without a trace. 1 minute they're folding laundry, sending a text, laughing at dinner, and the next gone. No calls. No clues. No closure. That's the pain this family endured. A pain that sat heavy in their bones for years. Never easing up. Never answering the question that echoed every single night. What happened to her? Now, imagine their dog, the one family member who never forgot, never gave up, leading police to something hidden in the woods. Something no one was supposed to find. You feel that chill up your spine? That's the start of our story. You see, this isn't just a mystery. It's a reminder of something deeper. That sometimes, answers come from the least expected places. That loyalty doesn't fade with time. That hope, even when it's paper-thin, is sometimes enough to crack open the past and bring the truth roaring back to life. This story touches on so many parts of the human experience: loss, love, loyalty, and the unshakable instinct that animals sometimes have, the one science still can't fully explain. And here's where you come in. Because this story doesn't work unless you feel it. Unless you walk through it with me. You've already taken the first step by clicking on this video. Now stay with me, and I promise by the end, you'll not only know what happened, you'll understand why this case is going viral across TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and even hitting the top of Google Trends. There's a reason why everyone's suddenly talking about the dog that solved the case. And once you hear it, you won't be able to forget it either. The atmosphere in town had shifted long before the dog made his move. Some say animals sense things long before humans do. Maybe that's why Max, the 6-year-old retriever, started sleeping near the back door every night, even in winter. Maybe that's why he stopped playing fetch and instead spent his time pacing the edge of the yard, staring into the woods like he was waiting for someone. His owners, Lori and Jason Myers, thought it was just age. Or maybe he was sensing deer, coyotes, whatever. But now they wonder if it was something else. Something he knew that they didn't. Because Max had grown up with Emily, their daughter's best friend, the teenager who had vanished after a summer bonfire party 10 years ago. Her case had gone cold. Dead-end leads. No arrests. Just silence. But Max remembered. Or sensed. Or smelled. Whatever it was, it hit him hard on that cold Tuesday morning when he burst through the screen door and took off, barking wildly. Jason, still holding his coffee, followed the dog more out of concern than curiosity. But when Max stopped and started digging with frantic energy, Jason's world tilted. Because there, under the brittle leaves and tangled brush, was something metallic. A bracelet. A bracelet that used to belong to Emily. And just like that, the wheels of justice began to turn again. Now, you might be wondering, how does a dog remember something after 10 years? How did he know where to go? And more importantly, what did the police find when they started digging in that remote patch of woods? Those are the questions we're going to answer together. But here's where I need you. Don't just watch this like another true crime story. Engage. Be present. Because this isn't fiction. These are real people. Real pain. And as we uncover each layer, from the night Emily vanished, to the twist that had even seasoned detectives shaking their heads, Your role as a viewer matters. Share your thoughts, feel the tension, hold onto the clues. Because the most unbelievable part is still to come. We're talking about small-town secrets. About how one person's silence can derail an entire investigation. About the mental toll families endure when the world moves on, but their grief stays stuck in place. And yes, about how a dog who never spoke a word somehow managed to scream the truth louder than anyone else. You'll meet the people involved. The friend who saw Emily last. The detective who refused to retire until the case was solved. The neighbor whose backyard suddenly became a crime scene. But don't think this is going to be a straight line from mystery to resolution. There's a curveball coming. One that no one, not even the cops, saw coming. And it changes everything you thought you knew about this case. So, don't click away. Don't scroll to the comments just yet. What you're about to hear will have you questioning the very nature of coincidence, instinct, and justice. And let me say this, the ending? It's not what anyone expected. I know that's a bold claim. But stick with me, and when we get there together, you'll see why this story has gone viral, why it's trending in True Crime 2025, and why it's not just a tale of a missing person. It's a lesson in never underestimating what love, grief, and a determined dog can do. And now, let's go back. Back to the night everything changed. Back to the bonfire. The laughter. The sound of music echoing through the trees. And the moment Emily took a path through the woods and never came back. Because what happened after that was hidden for a decade, until Max unearthed the truth. But what he led them to. That's where this story really begins. The night of Emily Travers's disappearance had never quite settled in the minds of those who knew her, and for good reason. She wasn't the type to just walk off. At 17, Emily was that rare combination of fiercely independent and deeply loyal, smart enough to keep herself out of trouble, but kind enough to follow her friends into it if it meant they'd be safe. She wasn't the girl people worried about at parties. She was the one who brought the extra phone charger, made sure no one drank too much, and always checked in with her mom before coming home. That summer night, the one that would carve a permanent scar into her community, had begun like so many others. A bonfire at the edge of the woods, music playing from someone's truck, plastic cups filled with cheap soda and cheaper beer. It was the kind of scene that lit up TikTok feeds across small-town America, teenagers dancing in cut-off shorts and hoodies, laughing under stars, pretending like the world wasn't about to change forever. In the days leading up to the party, nothing about Emily's behavior had set off alarms. She'd spent most afternoons at the animal shelter where she volunteered, walking dogs and reorganizing supplies. Her boyfriend at the time, Ryan Whitmore, had picked her up that Friday after work. Witnesses remembered seeing the two of them arguing. Nothing intense, just a spat about whether they were staying late or leaving early. Ryan said Emily had planned to walk home through the shortcut in the woods behind the Myers property. She'd done it dozens of times. But that night, she never made it back. Ryan's story never changed, and for a while, police had no reason to doubt him. There were no signs of struggle. No trace of her phone. No footprints, no torn fabric, no calls for help. It was like the woods had swallowed her whole. But then came the whispers. Not the kind that make headlines, but the kind that live in grocery stores and PTA meetings. Some said Emily had wanted to leave town. Others hinted she had secrets no one knew about. Secrets tied to someone older, someone with influence. A teacher, a deputy, maybe even a family friend. Rumors took root like weeds after rain, and suddenly, half the town was under a cloud of suspicion. The case became one of those local tragedies that never fully fades. Emily's photo, smiling wide beneath her red hoodie, stayed pinned to the bulletin board at the gas station, even when the corners curled with age. Candlelight vigils turned into quiet anniversaries. Her parents divorced. Her mother moved away. And through it all, Max, the family dog, stayed behind. Detectives combed through every inch of her life, but nothing ever stuck. Her friends were questioned. Her ex-boyfriend Ryan was brought in multiple times, but passed 2 polygraphs. One of her teachers, Mr. Callahan, was placed on administrative leave when someone claimed they'd seen the two having a serious conversation weeks before the party, but nothing ever came of it. And then there was the neighbor, Craig Hensley, a quiet man in his 60s who kept to himself, lived alone, and had a reputation for being weird but harmless. He told police he'd heard nothing that night, though some kids swore they'd seen his porch light flicker on just after midnight, right around the time Emily disappeared. Again, it went nowhere. The town moved on, or tried to, but not Max. The retriever had grown old since that summer. His once sleek coat now duller, his step a little slower. But when he took off into those woods 10 years later, it was like something inside him had snapped awake. His nose to the ground, tail stiff, eyes locked forward, as if the past had finally started bleeding through the present. And when the bracelet was found, everything changed. The engraved silver charm, worn smooth by time, was still unmistakable. A gift from Emily's mom. Her name and the words "forever loved" etched into the back. It had been missing from the start. Its discovery wasn't just emotional, it was physical proof that Emily had been in those woods. That someone had lied. That maybe the woods hadn't swallowed her, but someone had hidden her. Police reopened the case within hours, and this time they had fresh eyes, new forensics, and a very determined canine pointing them in the right direction. The media caught wind quickly, and within 48 hours the story had gone viral. Missing Teen's Dog Solves Cold Case trended on YouTube Shorts. Hashtags like #JusticeForEmily and #DogDetectiveMax started circulating on TikTok. People from across the country, true crime fanatics, armchair detectives, even dog lovers, latched onto the mystery. Everyone wanted to know, where had she been all these years? Who had been living with the truth while the rest of the world carried on believing she'd just vanished? As investigators expanded the search in the woods, they found more clues. Torn fabric. A rusted belt buckle. What looked like an old phone case buried under tree roots. DNA testing began immediately. Cadaver dogs were brought in. It became clear that this wasn't just a dog finding a trinket. Max had led them to a potential crime scene. But here's where things started to twist. When the forensics came back, not everything matched Emily. There was evidence suggesting someone else may have been in that location. Another person. Another scent. Suddenly, the case didn't just reopen. It exploded into something far more complex. Detectives began re-interviewing the original witnesses. And that's when the story started to shift. One of Emily's closest friends, Kara Dempsey, admitted that she hadn't told the full truth back then. She said Emily had been scared in the weeks leading up to the party. Not paranoid exactly, but on edge. She'd asked Kara strange questions about deleting texts, about how long GPS data stays on a phone. She even joked, "If something ever happens to me, check the basement." At the time, Kara thought it was a morbid joke. Now, she wasn't so sure. New suspects began emerging, people who had nothing to do with the original case, but who had since moved into the area. One such person was Dennis Cole, a former handyman who had been working odd jobs in town around the time of Emily's disappearance. No one had connected him to the case before, but when his name showed up on an old maintenance log for a property bordering the woods, investigators took notice. Cole had a criminal record, nothing major, just petty theft and trespassing, but enough to raise eyebrows. When questioned, he claimed he didn't remember the job or Emily. But the way he said it, something felt off. Like he was trying to sound forgetful. Still, Cole wasn't the only one drawing attention. The more they dug, the more inconsistencies surfaced in Ryan's timeline from that night. His phone records, once thought to be useless due to outdated tech, were now reanalyzed with newer methods. A ping placed his device not near the party when he claimed to have left, but closer to the wooded area. It didn't prove anything outright, but it made detectives look twice. And that's when they pulled the old tapes, security footage from a gas station half a mile from where Max had found the bracelet. There, at 12:17 a.m., a car matching Ryan's make and model was caught turning off the main road toward the back trails. He'd never mentioned that detour. Suddenly, everyone was a suspect again. But just as quickly as leads began appearing, they started contradicting each other. Kara swore Emily was afraid of someone older. Ryan insisted he never left the party until he said he did. Cole denied even knowing who Emily was. And yet, All of their stories connected to that stretch of woods. And all of them, without realizing, were being pulled back into a mystery they thought had gone cold. The town grew tense. News vans lined the streets. People started locking their doors again. And in the middle of it all stood Max, the dog who had unknowingly unearthed more than just a bracelet. He had exposed a town's buried truths. But the question that remained was the most haunting of all. Had they found the place where Emily disappeared, or the place where someone had finally tried to hide the evidence? Because just when authorities thought they had enough to go on, a new discovery, one they never saw coming, would send the investigation spinning in a direction no one expected. And it would leave everyone wondering, if the dog had found this much, what else was still hidden in those woods? Just when it seemed like the case was finally gaining momentum, the investigation hit a chilling wall, one that didn't just slow things down, but made some start to question whether they were even supposed to find the truth. It began with a chain of evidence that simply vanished. The bracelet, the single most vital link between Emily and the newly discovered site, was removed from the forensic lab under perfectly logged procedures, but somehow, when it came time to present it for further testing, it was gone. Just like that. Surveillance footage showed nothing suspicious. Sign-in logs were clean. The bracelet had been there and then it hadn't. It sent a wave of panic through the department. Internally, fingers were pointed, protocols reviewed, and yet no one had a good explanation. The local sheriff made a vague public statement about a temporary misplacement, but behind closed doors, detectives were already muttering the words no one wanted to believe. Cover up. The mood in town shifted again. The hope sparked by Max's discovery started to dissolve into doubt, frustration, and something darker. Fear. It wasn't just about finding Emily anymore. It was about uncovering why certain pieces were being quietly removed from the board. Then came the warning. Not some ominous letter, not a masked figure in the woods. Nothing like the movies. It was a phone call. A blocked number. Detective Jenna Sloan answered, expecting another press inquiry, or maybe a tip from the public. Instead, a voice, calm, even-toned, almost too polite, said, "You're looking in places that should stay buried." Then the call ended. No trace, no identity, no callback. Jenna had already been under pressure. She wasn't from this town. She'd transferred in from a bigger city, chasing a slower pace after burnout nearly cost her her badge. But Emily's case pulled her in like gravity. She saw pieces of her younger sister in the missing girl. She felt the frustration of small-town secrets and the way silence could stretch on for years. So when the warning came, it didn't scare her off. It only made her dig deeper. But not everyone shared her fire. Her partner, Rick Madsen, a hometown lifer, started pulling back. Citing protocol and jurisdiction, he began insisting they hand the case off to a cold case task force. But Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that Rick knew more than he was letting on. It wasn't until she revisited the original interview notes that something truly strange surfaced. A reference to an anonymous tip had been quietly redacted, one that came in 2 weeks after Emily vanished. The note had been logged by an officer who had since retired, a man named Earl Renshaw, who now lived in a trailer on the outskirts of town. Jenna tracked him down, expecting little more than foggy memories and vague recollections. Instead, Earl met her with a blank expression and a door half open, refusing to talk. "That case already took more from me than you'll ever understand," he muttered before slamming the door. She stood there for a long moment, stunned, processing his words. What exactly had it taken from him? And then came the biggest revelation yet. Not from forensics, not from some long-lost witness, but from Emily's mother, who had remained largely silent all these years. A woman broken by grief and guilt, she'd recently returned to town following the discovery of the bracelet. She reached out to Jenna unexpectedly, requesting a private conversation. Over coffee in her tiny rental apartment, she pulled out a letter, yellowed with age and sealed in a plain, white envelope. It had been mailed anonymously just days after Emily disappeared, but she had never turned it over to police. "I didn't want to believe it," she said, tears tracing her cheeks. Inside was a single sentence. "She knows about the cabin." No one had ever mentioned a cabin. There were no records of one in any reports, no maps detailing anything relevant in the woods. But the way Emily's mother said it, the cabin, it wasn't just any structure. It had meaning. She explained that years earlier, when Emily was about 11, she'd gone camping with her father and uncle on private land outside town. Something happened there, something Emily never talked about. Afterward, she refused to go back. For years, the girl had nightmares, sometimes waking up screaming. When her mother tried to press for answers, Emily would shut down completely. The only thing she ever said was, there was a place that was supposed to be safe. That night, Jenna drove out to the edge of the property near where Max had found the bracelet. She used old GIS overlays and topographic scans to pinpoint structures that may have existed decades ago. Sure enough, nestled deep in the unmarked stretch of woods was a small, square shape, long abandoned and hidden from view. She started hiking toward it with nothing but her flashlight, a printed map, and a gut instinct telling her she was walking straight into something far bigger than a missing persons case. But just as she neared the clearing, something or someone moved. Fast. She caught the flicker of a figure vanishing into the trees, just out of reach. Heart pounding, she advanced slowly, only to find the remnants of a rotting wooden cabin, its door slightly ajar, its windows boarded shut from the inside. And then, the sound of something falling behind her. She spun around, gun drawn, but found only her own footsteps. The air felt heavier there, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Inside the cabin, what she found wasn't a crime scene. Not yet. But it was something. A rusted lantern, scraps of cloth, an old Polaroid nailed to the wall with two girls in it, one clearly Emily, smiling uncomfortably. The other, her face scratched out with deep, violent gouges. Beneath it, words etched into the wood with what looked like a blade. Tell no one. And in that moment, everything shifted. Jenna realized the case wasn't just about who took Emily. It was about why everyone had stopped looking, and who still had something to lose if the truth came out. What she didn't know was that back in town, another piece of the puzzle had just vanished. This time, a witness who had recently come forward. A high school janitor who'd left a voicemail saying he remembered something from that night. Now he was missing. His house locked. His car still in the driveway. No sign of struggle. No sign at all. So now the question wasn't just who had hurt Emily, it was how many people were willing to make sure no one ever found out. And that's when the phone rang again, this time at Jenna's personal number. Jenna's hand trembled slightly as she stared at the vibrating phone in her grip, her personal number flashing across the cracked screen, an unfamiliar caller ID blinking silently. This wasn't supposed to happen, not on a number that had never been tied to the case. When she finally answered, her voice barely steadied by training, the line was quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then came the sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, as if someone wanted her to know they were listening to her just as closely as she was listening to them. And then, in that same eerily calm tone as before, the voice returned. You weren't supposed to find the cabin, it said. Now someone else has to disappear. Before she could respond, the line cut off. Dead silence again. No trace, no follow-up, no digital footprint. Whoever this was, they were always one step ahead, and that reality settled in Jenna's chest like a lead weight. While Jenna raced to trace the call through what few tools she had left, most official channels now wary of her after she ignored protocol and entered private property without clearance, another shock hit the town from a completely different angle. Miles away, in a quiet suburb outside the city limits, Emily's childhood best friend, Kayla Harrington, who had long moved away after high school and hadn't spoken publicly about the case in over a decade, was found sitting on the edge of her bathtub with a voicemail playing on repeat beside her. It had been sent at 2:47 a.m., the exact time Jenna received her call. The message was garbled, distorted, as if passed through an audio filter or intentionally damaged. But a few words rang out clearly through the static. You told her. You broke the circle. You were supposed to forget. Kayla hadn't told anyone about the nightmares she'd been having lately, or about the letter she found tucked into an old box of Emily's things her mother sent her last month. That letter, handwritten and never mailed, was addressed to Kay, and in it, Emily hinted at something dark she'd remembered, something about what happened on the second night at the cabin, something she feared could hurt more than just her family. The pages were incomplete, trailing off mid-thought, but there was enough there to send chills down Kayla's spine. Still, she'd done what most people in small towns do, buried it. Moved on. Until now. Kayla contacted Jenna in a panic, and within hours, the two were face-to-face for the first time. The reunion wasn't warm, it was heavy, cautious, layered with decades of unspoken tension. Jenna showed her the Polaroid from the cabin wall, and Kayla turned pale instantly. She recognized the setting. It was the same wooded background from their sixth-grade camping trip, the one Emily never talked about again. And the girl with her, the one whose face had been violently scratched out, wasn't another student. It was their chaperone. A woman named Melissa Dane, an outdoor educator who volunteered that weekend and disappeared a year later without a trace. Officially, she had moved out of state. But there were rumors. Whispers. People said she'd been seeing a much older man in town, that she'd gotten into some kind of trouble, that the sheriff at the time covered something up. But the deeper they dug, the less sense anything made. Melissa Dane's employment records were gone. Her address had no forwarding information. And strangest of all, there were no digital photos of her anywhere. It was as if someone had scrubbed her existence clean. That's when Jenna started comparing notes with a forensic archivist at the local university, an old friend who owed her a favor, and he found something she hadn't expected. An archived newspaper clipping from 1995 detailing a community incident in those same woods involving a youth camping program that had to be shut down after multiple students reported unusual and disturbing behavior by a staff member. No names were ever released. The article never ran in the town's official records. It had only survived through a scanned newsletter a parent posted to a now-defunct message board. That staff member, though unnamed, matched Melissa's description. The incident was never investigated. No arrests. No statements. No official complaints. And it happened exactly 1 year before Emily's trip. As Jenna and Kayla tried to piece together the implications, the situation took another twist, this time from someone no one expected, Rick Madsen, Jenna's partner, the one who had started pulling back from the case. He showed up at her door late one night, unshaven and visibly shaken, asking if they could talk somewhere off the record. They drove to an empty stretch of road near the edge of town where old grain silos lined the horizon, and that's when Rick confessed that years ago, during a routine call out to the woods, yes, those woods, he'd been told to stand down by then-Sheriff Donnie Blake. Rick had found a vehicle registered to Melissa Dane, abandoned behind a maintenance shed near the campsite, and inside it had been a journal. He only read a few pages before the sheriff took it and told him to forget he ever saw it. Now, after hearing about Jenna's discovery, Rick's guilt had returned with full force. "I should have said something years ago," he muttered. But they made it clear, some people just don't come back from that. The problem was, when Jenna asked who they were, Rick just looked at her and shook his head. "You already met one of them. You just don't know it yet." That's when it all started to fracture. The janitor who'd gone missing? His car turned up in a different county, burned out and stripped of plates. Surveillance footage showed it being driven by someone in a full-body hoodie, face completely obscured. But the footage also showed something else. On the dashboard, clearly visible through the windshield, was a photo of a girl. A school portrait. Emily's school portrait. Someone had left it there deliberately. It wasn't just about silencing leads anymore. It was about sending a message. And then, without warning, Kayla disappeared. No sign of forced entry. No signs of struggle. But her apartment had been left in a strange state. Windows open, blinds drawn shut, and on the kitchen table, a single sheet of notebook paper with only 4 words scratched into it. "You were there too." Everything Jenna thought she understood about the case, the timeline, the players, even Emily herself, was now in question. Kayla's sudden disappearance suggested she knew far more than she ever admitted. And if the words on that page were true, then maybe Kayla wasn't just a bystander. Maybe she had been a part of whatever dark event started all of this long before Emily vanished. And just when Jenna thought it couldn't spiral any further out of control, she returned home to find her own front door slightly ajar and her dog, Max, nowhere to be found. Jenna's heart sank the moment she stepped into her house. That familiar scent of pine air freshener mixed with something she couldn't quite place, something slightly metallic, like old blood or rust. It was the eerie silence that hit her the hardest. No scuffling paws, no excited bark, no Max leaping toward her like he always did the moment she opened the door. Instead, everything felt wrong. Her keys dropped from her hand as she slowly moved through the living room, eyes darting to the corners, half expecting someone or something to lunge out of the shadows. The TV was on, a static-filled channel buzzing softly into the room. But she hadn't left it on. She would never forget to turn it off. Her hands trembled as she picked up the remote and shut it down, plunging the room into a deeper, more suffocating silence. On the coffee table sat her old case file, one she had locked in a drawer at the precinct weeks ago. Pages were torn out and laid out across the table like a ritual display. At the center was a photograph she'd never seen before. A picture of her, taken through her living room window just a night earlier. The timestamp in the corner was unmistakable. Someone had been watching her. Someone had been inside. That was the moment she knew this wasn't just about Emily anymore. This was about her. Whatever secret Emily had uncovered, whatever truth was buried in that forest, in that cabin, in the shadows of everyone Jenna thought she could trust, it was crawling toward her now. And it wasn't coming quietly. Her first instinct was to call Rick, but his phone went straight to voicemail. So she called the precinct, asked for him by name, only to be told he had taken emergency leave that morning. No explanation. No backup. And when she asked to trace the call, the operator hesitated. "Ma'am," the voice on the other end said carefully, "there's no record of you submitting a request to reopen the Emily case. There's no digital log of your evidence or your visit to the cabin. Your badge hasn't pinged any system in over 2 weeks." Jenna's knees buckled. It wasn't just her house being invaded. Her entire case history, her identity as an investigator, was being erased. She hung up and locked the door behind her, but the paranoia didn't stop there. She began to feel eyes on her wherever she went. At the grocery store, someone lingered too long in the frozen food aisle, seemingly browsing but always turning up in the corner of her eye. At the gas station, she noticed the same black pickup parked behind the car wash, engine running, windows tinted so dark it reflected her own worried face like a mirror. And at night, the sound of someone walking across her roof, slow, deliberate steps that never came from animals, became routine. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. She began carrying her service weapon at all times, even while brushing her teeth, just in case. The real fracture came the morning she received the envelope in her mailbox, sealed in red wax, no return address. Inside was a single photo, Max, her dog, staring into the lens with eyes wide, surrounded by a dim room she didn't recognize. Tied around his neck was a ribbon, the same plaid ribbon Emily wore in her school portrait. Jenna's scream echoed down the street, but no neighbors came out to check. It was like the world had already turned its back on her. Attached to the photo was a note scrawled in childlike handwriting that read, "The dog remembers. Will you?" Her mind began spiraling. Had Max remembered something at the cabin? Had he been leading her somewhere that night not by accident, but because he knew something she didn't? Dogs had long-term memory, she knew that. But was it possible that something at that site had imprinted itself so strongly on him, he'd gone into the woods with a purpose? Was it possible Max was the only true witness left? And if someone had taken him, then they believed it too. That same day, she visited her mother, desperate for grounding. Her childhood home felt like the only safe place left. But as soon as she arrived, her mother met her with a confused expression and said something that knocked the wind out of Jenna's lungs. "Sweetheart, why are you asking about Emily now? I thought we agreed to leave that chapter closed." Jenna stood frozen, her voice trembling as she replied, "What do you mean we agreed? I've never talked to you about her until this week. Her mother's face fell pale, lips parting slowly. No, you were here. Just last month. You asked about the camping trip. About that teacher, Melissa Dane. I told you everything I knew. A sick, cold dread spread through Jenna's stomach. Someone pretending to be her. Someone who had her voice, her face. Someone who had already been rewriting the story from the inside. She ran to her old room, still preserved like a time capsule, and started tearing through the boxes in the closet. Behind one, stuffed under a stack of old yearbooks, she found a journal. Her journal. But there were entries she didn't remember writing. Pages filled with fragmented memories of a night in the woods, of being cold, of hearing crying, of covering something up. The writing was her own, the tone unmistakable, but the words felt foreign, as if someone else had crawled into her mind and planted them there. Was it possible that the trauma of the case had caused her to forget? Or was something much more sinister happening? Something that had been planned all along? By the time Jenna returned to her car, a black feather had been tucked under her windshield wiper. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt it in her bones. She was being warned. Someone wanted her to stop. But she couldn't, not now. Not when she was starting to suspect that maybe this story hadn't started with Emily at all. Maybe the real secret was why Jenna herself had always felt so drawn to this case. Maybe the answer wasn't just buried in the woods. Maybe it was buried in her. Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into something that didn't just involve Emily or the case, but something far bigger, something buried beneath years of silence and forgotten truths. She had spent hours tracing every lead, looking at every piece of evidence over and over, hoping for something that might make sense of it all. But with each passing hour, the more the pieces refused to fit together. The fear had slowly morphed into a gnawing frustration, one that dug at her soul and made every shadow seem threatening. Yet there was one thing she couldn't stop thinking about: the black feather. The one that had appeared on her car's windshield the night before. It had no reason to be there, no logical explanation. Jenna had almost tossed it aside, thinking it was a random occurrence, but a part of her couldn't. She kept it in the glove box, hoping maybe it was just another clue. Something, anything, that might give her a breakthrough. But what happened next shattered everything she thought she knew. She received a call late one evening, just as the last remnants of daylight were slipping from the sky. She didn't recognize the number, but she picked up anyway. The voice on the other end was low, strained, and almost mechanical. "You don't understand what you're walking into." The words were barely audible, as if they were being whispered from a distance. "It's not Emily. It's you they've been waiting for. You always were." Before she could respond, the call dropped. But the message hung in the air like a weight around her chest. She immediately went through her contacts, trying to trace the number, but it led to nowhere, just an untraceable burner phone. Panic started to set in, but she pushed it aside. She had heard threats before. She'd been in dangerous situations many times over her career. She knew how to handle herself. But there was something different about this call. The voice didn't just sound like a warning. It sounded like someone who had already seen the end of the story. Desperate for answers, Jenna decided to visit Rick, hoping that he could help make sense of it all. He had always been a steady presence in her life, a fellow officer she could trust implicitly. But when she arrived at his house, it wasn't Rick who greeted her. It was his wife, Carrie, and her face was drained of color, her lips trembling. Carrie took one look at Jenna and closed the door behind her, pulling her into the dimly lit living room, away from the streetlights and prying eyes. Jenna felt her stomach turn as she watched Carrie's hands shake while she spoke in hushed tones. "Rick, he's not who you think he is," Carrie whispered, barely able to make eye contact. "You have to believe me, Jenna. Everything Rick told you, it was all a lie. He's not just investigating this case. He's part of it. And it's not about Emily. It's about you." Jenna stood frozen, her thoughts racing, trying to process the words. Rick, her closest ally, was part of the very thing she'd been investigating? It didn't make sense. Rick had been with her every step of the way, but the look on Carrie's face told a different story. "What do you mean?" Jenna managed to choke out, her voice barely a whisper. Carrie swallowed hard, her eyes welling with tears. Rick was never just a cop, she continued, her voice trembling with fear. Before he met you, he was involved with people who do things, terrible things. Things you can't even imagine. He wasn't just investigating the case with you. He was watching you. He was waiting for the moment when you'd get too close to the truth. He knows things about your past, Jenna, things you've forgotten. Jenna's mind reeled. What could Rick possibly know about her? She had been so sure that their bond was built on trust, on years of friendship and shared history. Had she been blind to what was happening? Her thoughts were interrupted when Carrie handed her an envelope, its edges frayed and worn. Inside was a photograph, one Jenna didn't recognize, but one that made her blood run cold. It was of her, standing in front of a cabin in the woods, holding something in her hands. At first, she thought it was a flashlight, but then she realized it was a notebook, one that she couldn't remember ever owning. The notebook's cover was adorned with symbols she couldn't decipher, and the timestamp on the photo was from years ago, long before Emily's disappearance. This wasn't just a random photograph. This was evidence of something far darker, something far older than the case she had been chasing. Before she could process it, Carrie spoke again, voice shaking. Jenna, Rick's been looking for you this whole time. Not for Emily, not for justice. He's been trying to cover up the truth. You weren't supposed to remember. You weren't supposed to find that cabin. The pieces began to fall into place, and Jenna felt a sickening realization creeping up her spine. Could Rick have been behind the whole thing? Could he have orchestrated the disappearance of Emily and the attempt to erase her own memories of the night that changed everything? Jenna's breath quickened, and she felt the walls closing in. But before she could say anything, Carrie took a step back, her eyes filled with dread. Jenna, you need to leave now. Rick knows you're here. He's coming. Jenna didn't wait another second. She bolted out the door, the sound of her heart pounding in her ears as she raced to her car. The world around her had suddenly become a nightmare, a web of lies, betrayals, and dark secrets she had never imagined. And at the center of it all was Rick, the man she had trusted above everyone else. As Jenna sped down the darkened streets, the phone in her pocket buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Don't run, Jenna. We're coming for you. You're part of this now. Jenna's hand shook as she stared at the screen, her mind struggling to process the implications. Everything she thought she knew, everything she thought was true, was being ripped apart piece by piece. And the more she tried to escape, the closer the truth seemed to come. Was Rick the mastermind? Was he the one behind the secret that had plagued her past? Or was there someone else pulling the strings, someone far more dangerous than anyone had imagined? As the night deepened, Jenna's heart raced faster. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every passing car, a reminder that someone was hunting her. And all the while, the chilling question echoed in her mind. How far would they go to keep her from uncovering the truth? Jenna had barely slept in the days that followed the disturbing confrontation with Carrie. Every waking moment felt like it was spent looking over her shoulder, haunted by the unsettling realization that she wasn't just chasing a case anymore. She was caught in a twisted game, one where every move she made seemed to lead her deeper into danger. The worst part was that she could no longer trust the people closest to her. And trust, as Jenna knew all too well, was the only thing that had kept her grounded during her years as a detective. Now that foundation had crumbled. She had spent hours driving in circles, trying to clear her head, trying to figure out her next move. The road ahead was fogged with uncertainty, every potential direction leading to dead ends or worse, more lies. But there was one person she still had to face. Rick. He had always been her confidant, the man who knew her better than anyone, the one who stood by her side when no one else would. But now, it was clear that everything she thought she knew about him had been a lie. He was in the center of this mess, whether she liked it or not. And deep down, Jenna knew that the time had come to confront him. But the question remained, what could she even say? How could she begin to unpack the web of deception he'd spun around her without exposing herself as someone already tangled in it? It wasn't long before Jenna received a call from Rick. His voice was the same as it had always been, calm, measured, but there was something in the way he spoke that made her stomach churn. He was asking her to meet him. "Jenna," he said, his tone soft, almost pleading. "We need to talk. This can't go on like this. I'll explain everything. Meet me at the cabin." That cabin, the same one from the photograph. The one Carrie had warned her about. The one that seemed to hold the key to everything. Jenna's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears. She knew she had no choice but to go. But as she drove toward the cabin, a part of her wondered what kind of trap she was walking into. She didn't know if she was meeting the man she had trusted or a stranger who had been hiding behind his face all along. As she pulled up to the cabin, Jenna's headlights sliced through the darkness, revealing a figure standing in the doorway. It was Rick. But something about the way he stood there, so still, almost as if he were waiting for her to arrive, felt off. The last few days had been a whirlwind, each moment spiraling into something more bizarre and terrifying, but now, as Jenna looked at Rick standing there, it hit her with full force. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. "Rick," she began, but her voice faltered, the weight of what she had to say almost too much to bear. She wasn't sure if she was ready for the confrontation. But deep down, she knew that whatever happened tonight would reveal truths that she couldn't hide from any longer. Rick motioned for her to come inside, his face unreadable. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly, his voice low and almost apologetic. "But you have to trust me. There's more going on here than you understand." His eyes met hers, and for a moment, Jenna saw a flicker of something. Regret. Maybe? But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. He turned away and led her into the cabin. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The wooden floors creaked under her feet, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and old pine. It was almost as if the cabin itself was holding its breath, waiting for the storm that was about to hit. Rick moved to a small table in the corner and grabbed a file, one that Jenna hadn't seen before, one that looked far too familiar. He placed it on the table between them. "I've been trying to protect you, Jenna," he said, his voice tense. "I know you don't believe me, but you need to understand. What happened to Emily? What happened to you? It was never meant to be this way." Jenna could feel the chill creeping up her spine as she stared at the file. There, in the faded pages, was the truth she had been searching for. She could feel the pieces falling into place, and yet, something wasn't right. Rick was hiding something. The answers weren't in the file. They were in his eyes, in the way his hand trembled as he reached for it. But before she could make sense of anything, Rick stood up suddenly, his face grim. "Jenna, I'm not the only one who's been watching you." A cold shiver ran down her spine. She took a step back, her heart hammering. "What do you mean?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Who else is involved?" Rick hesitated, his eyes darting toward the window. Then, almost as if he had just made a decision, he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "You need to leave. Now." Jenna's mind spun. "What are you talking about, Rick?" Her voice cracked with emotion as she took a step toward him. "I need answers. I need to know what's going on. I need to know who you are." But Rick's expression hardened, his jaw clenched. "I'm not the man you think I am. And the truth, Jenna, is something you're not ready to hear. If you keep pushing, if you don't stop now," he trailed off, the warning hanging in the air like a shadow. The room was silent for a long moment. Then the sound of a car engine outside broke the stillness. Jenna froze. Her heart stopped. Someone was here. And they weren't here for a friendly chat. Rick's eyes flicked to the door, then to Jenna, and in that moment, everything shifted. "You don't have a choice anymore," he said, his voice strained. "You're too deep in this. You need to make a decision, Jenna. Leave now, and you'll be safe. Stay," and he paused, his eyes narrowing. "The truth will destroy you." Jenna felt her chest tighten. The ultimatum hit like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced, each option filled with its own terrible consequences. If she left now, she might never know the truth. But if she stayed, she might be walking into the very trap Rick had been setting all along. For the first time in years, Jenna felt completely alone. Jenna's heart raced as she stood there, locked in a moment of unbearable uncertainty. Rick's warning echoed in her mind, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest like an iron fist. She had always prided herself on her ability to solve cases, to piece together the fractured pieces of truth, no matter how elusive they seemed. But now, standing in that dimly lit cabin, the pieces were slipping through her fingers faster than she could grasp them. The truth she had been chasing for weeks, the truth she thought was within reach, was slipping away into a far darker and more dangerous reality than she could have ever imagined. Outside, the engine of the car roared to life again, the sound growing louder, closer. Jenna turned, her breath catching in her throat. She could feel the pressure building, the walls closing in. Every instinct she had told her to run, to get out before it was too late. But her feet were frozen, her body locked in place as the truth she had been avoiding finally caught up with her. Rick was hiding something, something far worse than she had ever anticipated. The betrayal was already unfolding before her eyes, a slow, insidious revelation that made her stomach twist in horror. She had trusted him, believed in him, and now he was the one who had led her into this mess. But even more chilling than Rick's silence was the realization that this wasn't just about him. This wasn't just one man hiding his secrets. It was a conspiracy, a vast, tangled web that went far deeper than she had ever thought possible. Suddenly, the door to the cabin swung open with a deafening creak. Jenna's body tensed as two men stepped inside. Their faces were familiar, but not in a way that made her feel safe. One of them was Paul, her former partner, the one who had left the force under mysterious circumstances. The other was Daniel, an investigator from a rival agency she had worked with years ago. Their presence here at this moment was like a punch to the gut. "Jenna," Paul said, his voice as cold as ice. "We didn't want it to come to this." She didn't need to hear any more. The pieces fell into place with an awful clarity. Paul, Daniel, Rick, they were all in this together. And they had been using her all along. She had been the pawn in their game, the one who had unknowingly pieced together the final puzzle pieces of their criminal empire. They had manipulated her, twisted her trust until she had unknowingly uncovered their secrets. She had thought she was the one solving the case, but it had always been about keeping her in the dark, pushing her to find the answers that would only bring her deeper into their web. Her breath caught as the weight of the truth finally hit her. She had been chasing shadows, blind to the fact that she was a part of something far bigger than she had ever realized. The missing persons, the strange clues, the cryptic messages, they were all connected to a massive underground operation that reached across multiple states, involved more players than she could count, and threatened far more than just her own life. "Why, Paul?" Jenna's voice broke through the tension, her words barely a whisper as she stepped back, her mind reeling. "Why would you do this?" Paul's eyes hardened, his lips curling into a smirk that sent a chill down her spine. "Because you're the only one who could have gotten close to it. You were getting too close, Jenna. You and your damn dog. It was only a matter of time before you uncovered everything." The truth stung like acid. All along, it had been a setup. Jenna had thought she was the one unraveling the mystery, but the reality was far more sinister. Paul had been watching her from the very beginning, leading her to the most dangerous truths without her ever knowing it. Rick, Daniel, and the others, they had been using her as a tool, a distraction to keep her digging, to keep her vulnerable. She had been so focused on the clues that she never once stopped to look at the bigger picture. And now it was too late. The noose was tightening, and there was nowhere to run. "Jenna," Rick said quietly, his voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "I didn't want it to go down this way. But I don't have a choice anymore." Her mind spun. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that it left her breathless. She had trusted these people, trusted them with her life, and they had destroyed her, piece by piece, until nothing of the woman she once was remained. Daniel stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You're a liability now, Jenna," he said, his voice low and menacing. "And you know too much. It's time to make a choice." The tension in the cabin was suffocating. Jenna felt the walls closing in, her pulse racing in her ears. She was out of time. There was no escape. No safe place to hide. They had set the trap, and now she was caught, trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The choice before her was impossible. Run and risk everything, her life, her safety, her future, or stay and confront the truth, knowing full well that doing so would only drag her deeper into the conspiracy that had already swallowed her whole. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she glanced between Paul, Daniel, and Rick. Each of them held a part of the puzzle, but none of them had the answers she needed. They were all complicit, all hiding something, and Jenna realized then that she was no longer in control. She had become a part of the very conspiracy she had been investigating. "Make your choice, Jenna," Rick said, his voice trembling, as if he too were caught in the web of lies. "But be careful. It's not just you they're after anymore." Her mind raced, her eyes darting to the door, to the window, to every possible escape route. But she knew deep down that there was no escaping this, no running from the truth that had finally caught up with her. The stakes had never been higher, and the choices she made now would either destroy her or reveal the full, terrifying scale of the conspiracy that had ensnared her. Jenna took a shaky breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. For a moment, no one spoke. And in that silence, Jenna understood. Whatever came next, it would be a fight for her life. Jenna's heart pounded as she stood at the threshold of the abandoned warehouse, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her with unbearable force. The final pieces of the puzzle had been placed together, but the answers she'd uncovered didn't offer any comfort. They only led her deeper into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust and tension, a quiet hum of anticipation hanging in the shadows. She knew this was the moment where everything would either collapse in on itself or finally be torn open to reveal the horrifying truth. Rick had led her here, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place, guilt, fear, or maybe even regret. But there was no time for questions now. As the door creaked behind her, Jenna turned to face him, trying to read the expression on his face. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, everything had been leading to this confrontation, this moment where she would either be free of the web they'd trapped her in, or pulled deeper into it. "You knew it all along, didn't you?" Jenna's voice was low but steady, her eyes never leaving Rick's. "This whole thing, this case, it's been a lie from the start. I was just a pawn to keep the heat off you and the others." Rick flinched, his jaw tightening as if he was about to say something but he didn't. Instead, he gestured to the darkened corners of the warehouse. Jenna felt a chill creep down her spine as a figure emerged from the shadows, someone she never expected to see. Someone she thought was long gone.
"Paul."
Jenna's breath hitched. "No, it can't be." Paul's expression was unreadable, but there was something cold in his eyes that made Jenna's blood run cold. She'd trusted him. She'd relied on him. And now, here he was, standing at the center of the conspiracy just like Rick. "I'm sorry, Jenna," Paul said, his voice almost a whisper, filled with a kind of hollow sincerity that made her want to scream. "We didn't want you to find out this way, but it's over. You're too deep in. You should have stopped asking questions." The finality in his voice hit harder than any blow could have. Jenna's hands clenched into fists, her mind spinning as she tried to process everything. All along, she'd been chasing shadows, led by people she thought she could trust, only to find out that they were the ones who had orchestrated it all. This wasn't just about the missing person anymore. This was about power, greed, and a conspiracy that had been running far deeper than she had ever realized. "What's your endgame, Paul? What is it you really want?" Jenna demanded, her voice trembling with anger and betrayal. Paul's eyes flickered briefly to Rick before turning back to her. "You really think it was just about the money? The missing people?" "No, Jenna. This is bigger than all of that. You were always meant to find this. You were always the one who would uncover the truth. But it wasn't supposed to be like this.
You're too close now."
"And I'm sorry, but you can't leave here." Jenna's breath caught in her throat. The reality of it hit her like a freight train. They weren't just hiding the truth, they had orchestrated this entire thing, manipulated her every move to get her here. She had been used as a tool, an unwilling player in a dangerous game that had been set in motion long before she even realized it. She had been part of the conspiracy all along, and now they wanted her out of the picture, silenced before she could expose everything. Rick stepped forward, his expression hardening. You don't get it, Jenna. We did this for the greater good. For everything we've worked for. You're the last person who stands in the way of it all. So you either walk away or you stay and risk losing everything. We didn't want it to end like this, but you're out of options. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. The greater good? You've been lying to me from the start.
People are dead, Rick.
People are missing. And you're talking about the greater good. Her voice broke on the last word, a mix of sorrow and fury that threatened to overwhelm her. For a moment, there was only silence. The kind of silence that fills the space between decisions, the kind of silence that makes everything seem like it's teetering on the edge of collapse. Jenna felt the weight of it in her chest, felt the unbearable tension between her and the two men who had once been her allies. And then, just as the moment seemed to freeze in time, a gunshot rang out, echoing through the warehouse like a clap of thunder. Jenna's body jerked instinctively, her heart stopping as she spun around. But there was no one there, no assailant, no attacker. Just the echo of the shot still ringing in her ears. Rick's eyes widened, his face draining of color. What the hell was that? Before Jenna could make sense of what had just happened, she heard the click of boots behind her. A new figure appeared from the shadows. Daniel. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, Jenna saw something that made her blood run cold. Her dog, Max, sitting obediently beside him. The same dog she had trusted to lead her to the truth. It wasn't just a coincidence that Max had been part of this entire ordeal. He wasn't just a pet. He was part of the plan. Her mind reeled as she tried to make sense of it. You didn't think you were the only one being played, did you? Daniel's voice was like a knife, cold and calculated. You were always part of the game, Jenna. Always. Jenna's world seemed to collapse in on itself. Max, her loyal dog, was part of it all. She had trusted him, had relied on him to guide her through the most difficult moments of her investigation. But now, she realized, he had been leading her straight into the arms of those who wanted to silence her. Everything she had believed in, every piece of trust she had placed in the people around her, was a lie. The truth she had fought so hard to uncover was the darkest twist of all. The one thing she had never suspected was right in front of her the entire time. Max, her companion, her dog, had been planted to guide her to this moment. With her heart racing and her mind spinning, Jenna knew that this battle wasn't over. It had only just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Whatever came next, she would have to face it alone. The truth was out there, but so were the people who would do anything to make sure it stayed buried forever. The days that followed felt like a blur for Jenna, her world spinning on its axis as the dust finally began to settle. She had managed to escape the warehouse, to run from the danger that had almost consumed her, but there was no sense of relief. There were no heroes in this story, no neat resolutions, just fragments of truth scattered like broken glass. Max, her loyal dog, had been taken, and for a while, Jenna wondered if she could ever trust anything or anyone again. But it wasn't just the betrayal of those closest to her that haunted her. It was the realization that the conspiracy, the game, had reached far beyond what she had originally believed. The answers were out there, yes, but they didn't lead to closure. They led to even more questions, things that no one, not even her, would ever fully understand. She'd made the decision to press charges, to bring everything into the light. Rick and Paul were arrested, their connections unraveling as the investigation deepened. The people they had been working with, those who had been hidden in the shadows, were now exposed, their actions splashed across headlines. But even as the weight of the truth began to sink in, Jenna couldn't shake the feeling that something important had slipped through the cracks. The truth, she realized, wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much larger, far more intricate web that would continue to unravel long after she was gone from it. Jenna had come to terms with the fact that peace was elusive, a faraway notion that would never truly be hers. She wasn't a hero. She wasn't someone who could change the world. But she could stop the conspiracy from growing. She could stop it from continuing to manipulate and destroy lives. And that was enough for her for now. Max's sudden disappearance after everything had been revealed felt like an open wound, the kind of unresolved pain that never quite heals. She had hoped to find him, to somehow make everything right again, but the truth was, he had been taken for reasons Jenna still couldn't comprehend. There were too many things left unspoken, too many questions left unanswered. In the weeks that followed, she found herself standing at a crossroads, torn between the desire for normalcy and the pull of the mystery that still lingered. Could she ever live a normal life again after everything she'd seen? Could she go back to being the person she once was, before the darkness had found her? The answer wasn't as simple as a yes or no. Jenna knew she would never be the same. The darkness had touched her, had changed her in ways she couldn't explain. But as she walked down the familiar streets of her hometown, her mind constantly whirling with the unanswered questions, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks, a man standing by the corner of the street. His face was partially obscured by a cap, but there was something familiar in the way he stood. Something that made her heart skip a beat. It wasn't until he turned slightly, enough for her to catch a glimpse of his eyes, that she knew. She wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or something more sinister, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was another piece of the puzzle she had yet to find. The man didn't say anything. He didn't approach her. But the look in his eyes was enough. It was the look of someone who knew something she didn't. Someone who had information, a clue that would bring everything full circle. Or maybe he was just another ghost from the past, a shadow that would fade as quickly as it had appeared. Jenna's heart raced as she watched him disappear into the crowd, the same unease she'd felt when the story first began creeping back into her bones. She had thought she was done with this, that she could walk away, but there was always more. The conspiracy hadn't ended. It had simply evolved into something new. And as the man vanished from sight, Jenna felt the weight of the truth settle over her once more. The mystery wasn't finished. It was never going to be finished, because there would always be someone, something, lurking in the background, waiting for the next person to get too close, to ask too many questions, to dig just a little too deep. And just like that, the story didn't end. It lingered, hanging in the air like a heavy fog that wouldn't lift. Jenna knew that the answers she had sought would never truly bring peace. They might never even bring closure. The people involved in the conspiracy were still out there, scattered in the shadows, their plans still in motion. There would be no simple resolution. There would only be more layers of deceit and betrayal, more pieces of the puzzle that would continue to slip through her fingers. The truth, in the end, wasn't a place where anyone could stand victorious. It was a constantly shifting, ever-present force that would never stop calling, never stop pulling at the edges of every story, every life, until it was too late to turn back. Jenna turned away from the street corner and walked into the night, her thoughts racing with the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The mysteries would never be solved, and the danger would always be just one step behind. But for now, all she could do was keep moving forward, knowing that whatever came next, she would face it with the weight of everything she'd learned. And maybe, just maybe, she would finally find the peace she was searching for, not in the answers, but in the quiet acceptance of the mystery itself. As the night swallowed her up, the question lingered in the air, unanswered. Who, or what, was watching next?